I'm glad to see there's been a good turnout. Now, I've noticed that all the speakers have to give a little bit about themselves at the front. So three things that maybe define me, or moments. One is my father was a minister in the Church of Scotland, a Presbyterian church. And one of the things I learned from my father is it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you think, it's what you do that counts. It is the only thing that is there at the end of your life, what you've done. And in a bit of a nationalistic thing he used to hammer home was, and the Scots are good at doing things. Other nationalities, they can do the talking, they can do the thinking, but we do the doing. So that's one thing, and that's, I guess it's kind of stayed with me. Another thing, when I was 15 at school, I went for careers advice. By which time, as a teenager, the Drummond family were living in this industrial town. It was a steelworks town. It was a one industry town. And the careers advice officer asked me what I wanted to do, and I can't remember what I was saying. I actually think I wanted to go and do archaeology at university. And I could see in front of him his list. 1 to 3 O levels. That's what was expected of me. So he tried to talk me into doing an apprenticeship down at the steelworks. And I said no. 5 years after that meeting, they closed the steelworks down. So I'm glad I didn't go along with that. So that was a kind of defining moment. Another defining moment in my kind of evolution was... Actually, no, there's two. My mother was actually panicking about me. What's her bill going to do? And she actually paid good money to go and see a careers of, like somebody who did it for, got paid to do this. And a whole day of questions and tests and things. But the first two questions they asked me on that day, and I had to go down to London for this, was, what do you think you're good at? And the one thing I knew I was good at was making things. And then the other thing this person asked me was, the second question, what are your interests? Now, at that stage in my life, I would be 16 by then, I was interested in music. Lots of young lads are interested in music, or young teenagers. So music and making things. Now, after my mother had paid, 2 weeks later, the foolscap envelope comes, open it up, and there it was. They suggested that her son should become a musical instrument maker, as in making violins or cellos. I mean, the rest of the day was irrelevant. So I was feeling guilty to my mum, because, I'd fucked up on the old, they were right, I actually got 4. But, so I phoned up the place and said, well, how do you become a musical instrument maker? And they said, well, first you've got to go to furniture college, furniture making college. Now, the capital of furniture making used to be High Wycombe in the UK. So I phoned up the college there, and they said, well, you've got to go to art school first and do a foundation course. Now, I hadn't even done art O-level, but I was good at drawing. So I put some drawings together, went along to the local art school and got in. And then fell in love with painting. And then had all these fantasies that me, Bill Drummond, was going to be a great painter. I was into, this is like between 70, 74, and my love of painting was broad and wide. It was Turner, it was Rembrandt, it was, 50s modernism, Pollock and the guys. But then one day, I'm standing in front of the easel in Liverpool Art School by then. And maybe I was having to face the fact that actually I didn't have genius. But I wasn't wanting to accept that. What I was thinking while I was standing in front of the easel was, I don't want, all this work I'm putting into what I'm doing, and I don't want it just to hang on the wall of some rich fucker, I was 19 and idealistic, and this wasn't right. So I walked out of there, and I'd actually been writing an essay, what is called Why Andy Warhol is Shite. Now, this is just after there'd been a big Andy Warhol exhibition in London. And my kind of theory at the time was my copy of Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles, which I'd bought, 3 years beforehand, was no better, which had cost me 7 and 6pence, was no better or worse than the copy that Andy Warhol had. And I liked the democracy of that. I also was into, by then, reading all sorts of paperbacks, all those French thinkers and all, On the Road, Jack Kerouac, Henry Miller, and Herman Hesse, all that kind of stuff that a 19-year-old then would have been into. And I was thinking, okay, so it's either pop music or writing. And I thought, well, I'll become a writer. And since then, I guess my trajectory, whatever it is, it's not a career, has involved sort of music at times, writing, and it does still involve art. Okay, now I'm going to get down to the talk proper. 2002. I read an article, don't know if it was The Guardian, Independent, but in a broadsheet paper, about this new thing that Apple were going to launch called the iPod. And I thought the idea, this is genius. This is absolutely, I can have a thing that I can have in my pocket, and I can have thousands of pieces of music, every conceivable piece of music that I could ever want. I could have it in my pocket. I could be listening to it anywhere, at any time, doing almost anything. This was just what we'd been, if I'd been told as a 16-year-old this would one day exist. So within a month or so of the iPod being launched, I'd got myself one of them. And I was downloading off the internet all these tracks and from the file sharing sites, get all this free music, and thousands on there. And within a month of having this iPod in my pocket with all those tunes, everything I'd ever loved and all sorts of other things that I might grow to love, I was finding I'd be listening to about 30 seconds of a track, and I'd be flicking through to the next one, and then the next one. And while I was listening to that one, I would be thinking about why is this, it never seemed like there was a piece of music that I really wanted to listen to. I was thinking, what's going on here, Is this just what happens when you get old? Your tastes become jaded, and I've just got to accept this. But then I noticed my teenage daughters doing the same thing. They just flip through tracks. I don't know what's other bit. So I kind of started thinking, a theory started, not evolving, it just boomed into my head, sort of, that our basic relationship with music was changing, and it was changing fast. And I like it when things change, especially when it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable and you don't really know what's going on. That's what gets me going. And I started seeing the whole history of the 20th century music was the history of recorded music. The first commercial recordings came out in about the year 1901, I think it was. And through the 20th century, as the technology to record music evolved, it seduced and sucked in every form of music. All the old music, the pre-recorded music, all the classical and pre-classical, and all the folk music and the world music and jazz, and obviously pop and rock were genres of music that evolved out of the technology to record. It all wanted to become recorded music. It all wanted to become this thing that you can just switch on and comes out of a speaker. And in a sense, it all became one genre, recorded music. You might be listening to Bach, he might be listening to Stravinsky, I might be listening to the Beatles, and somebody else might be listening to the Backstreet Boys, but it's all actually the same. It's just something you sit down, you switch on, and you do nothing, and it's there. It had taken away from music so much of what music was about, which was about time, place, occasion. All we were left with was Christmas music that was vaguely about time. And I was thinking, maybe what's actually happening now, what the iPod is speeding up the process, is actually making recorded music become a thing of the past. One of the great art forms of the 20th century, but we were leaving it. It was beginning to die. It was nowhere near as important as it had been. Now, some art forms die overnight, like silent films. The day the movies came out, the first one, that was it for silent films. As an art form, other art forms take, a few centuries to die. But I felt this is the beginning of the end. This thing that had been so important to me. Okay. Going to switch slightly now. I've got a Land Rover. Some of you might have seen it out the front there, at the back. I've had that 18 years now. But at the same time as I get this iPod, I'm driving along in my Land Rover. And somebody's snapped my aerial, so I haven't got the radio on, nobody to talk to, no CDs to play. So I'm listening to the sound of the diesel engine. And diesel engines have got lots of levels, got bass rumble, you know, bits. And I found myself singing along, as I drive. Oh, within a minute, it's not just my voice, there's a couple of other voices, you know, obviously in my imagination, but pretty vivid. They're singing with me. Within another minute, I've got 100 Vikings in the back of that Land Rover. Oh, huge, big swirling chords. No melodies or rhythms, but it's sounding fucking great. And then a while later, I can hear all the choir boys singing along in harmony with the wind blowing through the wing mirror. Now, maybe it's because I used to sing in church choirs when I was a kid, and school choirs, and like, you know, choral music is something I understood, so maybe it's natural for me to hear that. And it happened again a week or so later. And then and at some point, I gave it a name. The 17, this kind of fantasy choir inside my head. And if I was writing at home and having a bit of a block about something, instead of going down and putting on a cup of tea, I'd get out into my Land Rover, drive down a few lanes so I could hear this 17 in my... And I tell you, it was more vital. It was better than anything on that iPod. You know, and it was just in my imagination. So, my theory about recorded music and this thing, well, they're sort of getting close together. So I decided to see if I could make this reality, what I could hear in my head. And I did. I recorded a journey in the Land Rover, got a bunch of blokes in the studio, explained to them. You had a few wines and beers, and we spent the evening putting this thing together. At the end of the evening, it was sounding stunning. It was sounding better than I imagined. I actually, on the drive home, I had a bit of a fantasy that, forget about that. I will release this as a CD. It's going to be a worldwide smash. People are not going to resist this. But I woke up the next morning realizing nobody in their right mind is going to want to buy a CD of a bunch of blokes going, along with a Land Rover engine. But I knew something magical had happened the evening before, and I wanted to experience that again. So, about that time, this is 2003, I wrote a text. Now, it's quite naive and idealistic, but I kind of still stick by it. All recorded music has run its course. It has all been consumed, traded, downloaded, understood, heard before, sampled, learned, revived, judged, and found wanting. Dispense with all previous forms of music and music making and start again. Year zero now, a line in the sand. The 17 is a choir. Their music has no history, follows no traditions, recognizes no contemporaries. The 17 has many voices. They use no libretto, lyrics, or words, no time signatures, rhythm, or beats, and have no knowledge of melody, counterpoint, or harmony. The 17 struggle with the dark and respond to the light. So as I said, that night it went well with these guys, but I tried it with another bunch, and I tried it with the people that weren't singers. I tried it with young people, women, mixed, because obviously to begin with it was a very male-sounding thing in my head. And then I started to develop other scores. It's not just singing along with a Land Rover engine. Other ways, and putting things together to celebrate the birth of a child. The public coming together, acknowledging, well, in the traditional sense, a wedding. With that one, I'd get 17 of the grooms. I mean, it can work for gay weddings, it can work for lesbians, but if we're talking traditional, it's the bride and 17 of our friends and family, females there, and the groom, 17 facing each other. And there's this two-note thing that can be done with anybody, and I'm not going to get you doing it, but it's not a song, it's not melody, but it works. And I've got another one to celebrate somebody's life after they're gone. I've got ones that are done. So I started going public with this and actually going out and trying it at different places, the beginning of 2006. To begin with, it was in Europe, and it was at kind of specialist new music festivals or performance art festivals. So it was like, I was in Moscow and St. Petersburg and Vienna. I was kind of scared of doing it in the UK because I'd had a bit of history with music and things. And I just, I didn't want to be judged in the context, within the shadow of stuff I might have done in the past, or did do in the past. So I'm going to fast forward again a bit. How am I doing for time?
Fine.
Pardon?
Fine.
How long have I been talking for? No. Okay.
About 15 minutes.
All right. So I got a little bit ambitious with this. I got commissioned by Derby, or the city of Derby were opening a big new art centre. They wanted something to celebrate the opening of this centre. Some people there knew what I was doing with the 17th, and they invited me to put together something. So for what I did there, I should hasten on. It was very important that anything I did with the 17 was never recorded, so it could never become something you could download. You had to take part in it, and it was never performed as a concert. The 17 only perform for themselves, and it's different people at each place. It's never entertainment. It's never a consumer product. Anyway, back to Derby. So what I put together there, I worked with 100 groups of 17. So that's 1,700 people altogether. And each group was a different something. So we had 17 Bollywood dancers, you know, but they were just of the Asian community, young girls that did. But we had 17 road sweepers, 17 taxi drivers, 17 nurses, 17 choristers from the cathedral, 17 punk rockers. So hopefully, those 100 people somehow reflected all of the people in Derby. And with each group I worked with, I'd spend about a half an hour working with them, going through a little bit what I've been telling you, and record them singing one note for 5 minutes. I'd give them the note, ah, and then say thank you, and then start working with the next group. And it took about 6 weeks to get this whole thing together. 20 groups ended up singing one note, another 20 another note, and 20, and each of those notes that they were singing were the different black notes on the piano, which for those music people here will know that's the pentatonic scale. The scale that's used in Irish, Old Welsh music, Scottish music, Chinese music. It has a certain kind of vibe to it. So put all this together, you know, there is recording, but we don't add any reverb, we don't add any studio trickery. And all 1,700 people that had taken part are invited back to the marketplace in the middle of Derby on a certain time given date with a big PA there. And we play them back what they've done. It's just this huge big chord, no melody, no rhythm, no words. But because you haven't got the usual things that you look for or listen to in music, you'd hear all these textures. Now, if they were all trained singers, it wouldn't have worked. Because trained singers, it just sounded like this bland harmony. But it was this kind of, when it was played back, it starts from 0 and builds up over the 5 minutes. And it's this roar of humanity that's coming back, but also kind of eerily beautiful. Afterwards, it gets deleted. Now, another one of the scores that I've done now a few times, and I was originally planning to do with you lot here, but for some reason I've changed my mind on that, which is a score called Surround, where I get 100 people to take part as members of the 17. I get a map of a city, I draw a circle on that map, so in reality, that circle is 5 kilometers. I walk to the edge of the circle with all the 100, and then we all walk around together, dropping off a person every 50 meters. And you've got to make sure that person can see the person 50 meters that way, that person the 50 meters that way. So the circle isn't perfect. It's kind of like as it goes with the streets, all the way around. Once we've got everybody in position, and you've got to trust that nobody leaves that post. Because if somebody leaves the post, a link in the chain has gone. When you get everybody there, you get the first person to go, whoa, to the next one, and then they've got to do whoa, so it goes all the way around. But it goes around 5 times, and once that whoa has gone around 5 times, that is that score complete and done. So hardly music, you'll be thinking. But the emotion you get from doing that, if you're standing there thinking, shit, I've got to do this thing, and people are maybe wondering why I'm standing here for 45 minutes, because it takes about 45 minutes to get everybody into position. And then, somebody's walking past you, and in the distance, you hear a wail, and then another one getting closer, and you know it's going to be your turn soon, and you've got to do it, even though there's this woman pushing a buggy past you. Whoa! And you do it. And then you hear it go on, it's passed on, and you feel this rush, and bit by bit, and it goes around again. And afterwards, it kind of exists in the memory of having taken part in this thing. Now, I did that first in Northampton, in England, and then I did it in Beijing, obviously in China. And I was supposed to do it in the official art area, but that seemed boring to me. So I found this huge, big, sprawling market, and I enlisted, with the help of a Chinese translator, 100 market stall holders. Now, of course, they're in the business of selling stuff, so they couldn't leave their post. So I didn't do the big circle for them. But this massive market, like that, two miles one way, 2 miles the other. And we did it from their market stall. So it all went up, the way I went up and down and round and about, all through this market. And then, the week before Christmas, I did it in Port-au-Prince in Haiti. And there we did it in the downtown, the Grand Rue area, which is the kind of the slum area, or the whatever, in the center of, it's not shantytown on the outside, but it's the old slumish area in the center. And we did it there. And afterwards, I was there for another few days doing some other things with the 17. I would hear that going through the night. It sort of got taken up by the city. And you kept on hearing it as if it was still going. Now, another thing that I do, anytime that I do a 17 somewhere, I'm not doing it here, it's part of the 17's World Tour, I do a graffiti. I find a wall, it's usually a bridge. I like doing them under bridges or on the side of bridges. And what it is, I'll read this. Actually, this is one of the scores. If you wake up in your tent tonight, I want you to perform this one, okay? This is score one, bit of a conceptual one. Score one, imagine. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and all music has disappeared. All musical instruments and all forms of recorded music gone. A world without music. What is more, you cannot even remember what music sounded like or how it was made. You can only remember that it had existed and that it had been important to you and your civilization, and you long to hear it once more. Then imagine people coming together to make music with nothing but their voices and with no knowledge of what music should sound like. The music they would make is that of the 17. So please, I'd invite you to perform that tonight. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and it's all gone. So back to Port-au-Prince, and me doing the graffiti there. I had it translated, so it's the opening line of that. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and all music has disappeared. It's those words that I've been doing as a graffiti. I had it translated into Haitian Creole, which is kind of like a very simplified French mixed in with some African language. And I did it in a wall in Port-au-Prince. 2.5 weeks later, they have their earthquake. All the buildings around where this wall was that I'd painted this thing on collapsed. That wall was left standing. The people, then, it was a week or so later that I started hearing back these stories that they thought this was a prophecy. Because the day after that earthquake happened, there was no music in the city. Before that, when I was there, there was music all over the place. Every little, what I think called tap-taps, the little buses, music blaring out of them everywhere you go. There's music, or there's people making music. The day after the earthquake, no music whatsoever. Now, obviously, I'm not a prophet, but the fact that this was considered some sort of prophecy from God was a bit disturbing for me, and I didn't know how to handle that. And this part of me, I actually felt I was responsible for making that earthquake happen. If I hadn't have painted, which you know, it doesn't make any logical sense. So that's the thing I've been living with and developing, So I'm getting to last week, okay? Last week. I was invited to take part in a European forum for composers. Now, for whatever reason, within Europe, I'm now considered a composer. Serious music. But, I'm not, this last thing I am, So I go to this forum in the Alps in Austria. I get there a week ago on Friday. I arrive, and I haven't got a clue what I'm going to be doing. You know, but as I'm getting there, I'm getting off the bus. I had to get some trains. Getting off the bus, looking at it, I was like, it'd be great to do something up one of the mountains, you know, and some call across the mountains. But I realised they're too far. And then I meet the other, because there's 6 other composers there. And there are these heavyweight European, serious Germans and, you know, proper people. And I just feel like I'm a fraud. You know, why have I been invited here? And what am I going to do? You know, they're all there. And we've got this ensemble. You know, there's like 2 violinists, a cello player, a viola player, an oboe player, a bassoon player, double bass player, and a conductor. And the conductor's saying to me, so, Herr Drummond, when will we be expecting the manuscript for, you know, the piece that's to be played? Because we're all supposed to write a piece to be performed at the concert at the end of the week. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, you know, I may as well just run away. And, but that night, on my iPhone, I get an email from this bloke in Port-au-Prince, one of the guys I'd worked with out there, and he'd written this thing and it had been translated into English. He'd climbed this mountain above Port-au-Prince, and it's the first time he'd ever climbed, and first time he'd ever looked down upon his city. He'd never been in a plane, obviously he's never been in a plane in his life, but he's looked at, and he wrote this, and it was just so, in one sense, naive, but incredibly moving. So I thought, that's it, tomorrow morning, I'm going to climb up that Alp at the back of where we're staying. So in the morning, I find out, yeah, you can get up there and down in the day, and I get myself an apple, and I set off. And I get to the top, and it's fantastic. You know, if the Grim Reaper had turned up with a Colt 45 then, and he said, you got that 10 seconds, somebody said, the American, oh, yeah. I was, you know, when you're saying that thing, but I wasn't really thinking, you know, you made me feel a bit guilty. Because what I was thinking was, yeah, well, I've fucked enough women, I've had enough children, and I've done enough art, you know, I may as well be, you know, I'll be happy to go now. That's how good it felt up there. But I didn't, you know, I walked down, I went down the hill and got on, but I wrote, so my first score that I wrote then suddenly all made sense. Where is it? So they're not as big, these. I had to get them printed when I was there. And where did I put my glasses? Oh no, that's still the wrong one. On the mountain, climb to the top of, anybody's German any good here? Rechtsgogel. Anyway, that's the name of the Alp at the back. To the top, take time to listen to what is inside your head. Further information. Ascent and descent will take the best part of a day. Have a shit before setting off. Take an apple with you. Take sun cream. I didn't, I burnt. Drink water from a mountain stream. Look at flowers. Pick and eat blueberries. Listen to bees buzzing in the blueberries, wild blueberries, or blaeberries as we used to call them. They're so much better than what you get in the supermarkets. And a lot smaller though. Listen to bees buzzing in heather, notice things, take 2 sturdy legs, pray it does not rain, follow the red, white and red painted markers, eat your apple at the top. A score to be performed by those attending the Mitterstrel's Composers Forum any year. So once I'd got that written, I thought, I know what I'm doing now. So each day I put a score together, just a written one, simplified, and one of the ones, the food there was fantastic. Now, I understand there's the food being quite good here. Okay. Then, and what time are we going to have, do we have an evening meal? Because I wasn't here, okay? Okay. Then I'm going to want to perform, I want you to perform this one tonight. Now, as I indicated earlier, I grew up in a religious household. So we said grace before every meal. Just took it for granted. That's what I grew up with. And there's part of me that misses that kind of point, that break between what you're doing before and then all the talk that's going to happen over the meal, to actually, whether you believe in God or not, but actually just give thanks to the fact that you're sitting down to eat. So I put a grace together, and on the mountain, monotone, before any meal. Before any meal, close your eyes, hum slowly the following 2-bar melody. 5 times, G, B, A. Stretching the G over 3 beats and A over 4 beats. For German readers, read B as H. Now, we're going to do this now. just as a practice, but then we're going to do it when you have your meal. This is all it is. You don't have to, I'll tell you when you've got to do it. 5 times. So can you all close your eyes, please? I'm going to count you in and then we start. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Ridiculously simple, but it worked. And then I got them, the other people there, the ensemble and the other composers to do this thing. And in one sense I felt ashamed because they were all doing these kind of very modernistic, 12-tone, complicated stuff, and I'm just giving them these 3 notes. Now, there's 2 more scores I'm going to want you to do. I think. We'll do the simplest one. Now, what else was happening there was anytime somebody got up to speak, even if it was just to say, okay, it's time for to go to lunch, they get an applause. And because everything was in German, and my German is pretty basic, I'd applaud along whatever's been said, and this applause is going all over the place. And maybe it's a national trait of the German, or the Austrians, but the German-speaking people generally to applaud everything. So I ended up just listening to the sound of the applaud. And sometimes there was concerts every night. Sometimes it'd be down in this chapel in the church and the sound would be different there. And sometimes it would be this school that would be working as well. And so different places. And last night, the Saturday night, was the night that was going to be the concert for the piece of music written by the composers in residence, the 6 of us, to perform last night. So my score was for last night, and of course I wasn't there. I was on the back. I spent all yesterday coming back from Austria to get here. But this is it. This is what I gave to the conductor. Another eye-closing one, okay? At the concert, close your eyes. Applaud for 17 seconds. Listen to the applause. Further information. Obviously, this is for the conductor to read. This score can be performed solo or with other members of the 17. But it must be performed at the final night concert 2010 of the Mitterstrels Composers Forum, where the 17 will include all the musicians and all members of the audience. At the final night concert, the conductor will start the performance by counting the 17 in. 1, 2, 3, 4. To end the performance, he will call Schluss. He will also ensure this performance receives no applause. Okay? So we're going to do, and when I gave it to the conductor, he said, oh, I don't know if I can, because he somehow thought it was me making fun of them. He says, no, this is serious. This is, and I don't want anybody laughing afterwards thinking this is some sort of joke. I want people to close their eyes and applaud for 17 seconds and just listen to the texture of the applause. Foolishly, I haven't got a second hand on me. Has anybody got a watch with a second hand? You have? Okay. No, second hand for this performance. You have. Come up here. You're gonna be the conductor, okay? Okay. Now, but we'll tell them you've got to tell them to close their eyes, and you've got to count them in, and you've got to do this properly, and then you say Schluss at the end, okay? You know you're German, yeah? Yeah. Okay, go. This is good, yeah.
Okay. Alles fertig?
Shut your eyes.
Mach die Augen zu, bitte. Und jetzt geht's los.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now the other thing I asked them to do last night, day before yesterday, what was it? Yeah, Friday morning. One of the other composers is a Russian guy, and he was talking about back at Russia and listening to music back there. And it reminded me, back in 1993, I'd been involved in pop music, I'd stopped doing it. But my partner stroke colleague, not partner as in, partner, but my colleague, Jimmy Corty, phoned me up one day, says, look, Bill, I keep hearing this thing in my head. It is the Red Army Choir. Do you all know the Red Army Choir? Russian, yeah, okay. Red Army Choir singing Que Sera Sera. And she said, I can't explain it anymore. Now, I spent the rest of the day, I was living alone at that time, in my farmhouse, or a small farmhouse. Farmhouse sounds a bit grand, but just going around the house going, Que sera, sera, whatever will be. And just thinking, yeah, of course, the Red Army Choir, it's obvious. So I phoned up the Russian embassy in the afternoon in London and say, get the, yeah, well, no, what's Russian for yes? Da. Well, they just said yes, actually. But it was very Russian sounding. I said, do you have can I speak to the cultural attaché? Because that's all you always hear about cultural attaché. And they said yes, and I could hear his footsteps going down this long corridor, and in my head it was the Kremlin, and then the footsteps come back, and he says, cultural attaché, and I explained what I wanted to do, and says, you'll be there tonight, we have tickets. And it turned out, the Red Army Choir, or what was the Soviet, Red are playing in London that night. So I go along, and get introduced to the conductor and the manager of and explain what they'd never heard of Que Sera Sera. Yeah, but I had a recording, but sorted out 2 days later, and money in their back pocket. That's how it gets sorted out with these kind of guys. And 2 days later, in a recording studio, all of the Red Army Choir, their orchestra, which is all balalaikas, accordions, and they start playing it. They'd done an arrangement. It was all, Que sera. It was all too, no, take it down. So we recorded it, and it sounded pretty good. And I took it home, the recording, listened to it. But something was missing. And then I had in my head this other idea, which goes like, so I'll start singing along. Que sera, sera, whatever will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, war is over. If you want, obvious, straight back on it, because I got the mobile number for the manager of the Red Army Choir, but they're now in Belgium, European tour. I get a flight over, studio book, get all the boys back, and they're all got all the uniforms, the Russian uniforms. And they've never heard this. And I sit down at the piano and play them. Take that recording back in London. Jimmy and I get back in the studio, put this whole thing together. And this is the best thing we've ever done. But we've retired from pop music. And we are not going, and this is too good to release. So we take out some full-page adverts in the music papers and one of the broadsheets stating the K Foundation, that's what we're calling ourselves at the time, present the Red Army Choir singing Que Sera Sera, spelt with a capital K, Sera Sera, like is Latin with a C, / war is over. Will only be, in all formats, will only be released once world peace has broken out. Obviously, that's the way we can get around it. We don't have to release it until world peace breaks out. But we want to go through with we want to press up 1,000 records, just in case, any day, world peace breaks out. And so we go down to the cutting room where you actually have to cut, make an acetate. And, but the Israeli guy from the record company used to put our records out in Israel, was over in London, wanted to meet up with us. I said, yeah, come down to this studio. And he's in there, and then we hear him crying, and he's sitting at the back, and his tears are running down. And he says, I won't try and do an Israeli accent. That could be deemed as anti-Semitic. You're allowed to do Russian accents, but he was saying about my family were Russian Jews, and we have to release this in Israel. And because the accord, a peace accord, had just been signed. Was it Begin? I don't know. Anyway, Yasser Arafat, and they signed this thing. It's okay, all right. He's crying. We agreed for it to be only if it was released with Hebrew and Arabic, and released into the Western, and Gaza. And, it's available all over. So we let this go, but we know we've made a mistake. It gets released. It goes to #1 in Israel and in the left bank. Within it being released, within 2 weeks, the accord breaks down. And I know it was our fault. I know, it's because we'd gone back on the, But all this, and I have never, till Friday, I hadn't listened to this thing because I felt so guilty about it. You know, that we'd made this thing that caused, you know, the continued problem in the Middle East. But I thought, I was talking to this Eve called Vladimir, how do you say that Russian name? Vladimir, thank you very much. And so YouTube, it's on YouTube, you know, and it's got this sleeve, there's no film, and it's sounding fantastic. And I think, so I asked the people last night, when I wasn't there, so at the concert, to have that track played after my clapping one, just through the speakers as a kind of found object thing. Anyway, back to you now. I want you to see, this isn't going to take long now, this is the performance bit. There was another score that I put together, which I didn't have time to do there. I was going to do it, they had this lovely old milking shed, and I wanted to get everybody in the milking shed to do this performance. And it was based, starting from the way-o thing. So the first thing I want you to do is all do a way-o after me. I'm going to count you in, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, everybody stop, that's it. Now I could take this further, but just imagine you're in a cow shed, doing a big, massive cow shed, with the cows in there, a milking parlour. You lot were to be on the east side, all in a row of this cow parlour, milking parlour. You lot were going to be in the west side, and you lot were basically on where you're standing, actually, in this cow parlour. And it's fantastic, this old building, halfway up one of the Alps. And I'd have loved to have got that done last week, but there was no time to get it done. So thank you very much. That's all I'm going to do, okay? Except tonight, when we have the evening meal, I'll be calling a point where we're going to do that grace, all right? Thank you very much.